Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile. Today, Jake and I are going to review Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We saw it last night. We've had a night to get our thoughts together, and we want to talk about it now. Jake, what are some opening thoughts on Guardians Volume 3?
So it's interesting you point out that we took a night to sleep on it, because I think I really needed that night to sleep on it, because this is very different than the first two, I would say. It takes a different, very different approach to the Guardians. It's got some of your quintessential Guardians element. It's still got the sense of humor in it, but it's much more serious. It takes a darker, it looks at a darker story. So yeah, walking out of the theater, I had a lot of mixed feelings. I walked into the theater. Let me put it this way: I walked into the theater looking at it as like, okay, I'm gonna judge this against the first two Guardians films, and I think doing that maybe leaves you a little disappointed, a little unsatisfied, maybe is a better term. But having taken a night to think about it and trying to look at it not as a Guardians movie, but as a movie in its true, just as a movie by itself, it's a wonderful movie, I think.
Yes, and I agree. When I saw it, so I've seen it twice. As many of you know, I actually saw it on Tuesday night, and I was gonna post a review, and then Jake's like, "Hey, I want to see this too," and I was like, "You know what? Let's just wait, and we'll do it together." And that's what our channel is all about. But after seeing it twice and thinking about it, I really liked this movie.
Yeah.
And I know walking out, we had kind of talked a little bit about our thoughts on it, and yeah, like you said, you kind of had some mixed feelings. For me, the word that I would use to describe this movie is sophisticated. It is much more sophisticated than the first two Guardians movies. It approaches the character of Rocket, who's kind of the central main character in this, in a way that grounds a raccoon, into reality. One of the things that you and I both said is the music choices. While we love the music, it'll never hit that Guardians 1
Right.
kind of
I
lineup, which was
almost
just so elite.
I almost felt like they chose too much music, because I felt like the songs they picked were, for the most part, good. I liked the songs they picked, but I felt like they were just there and gone. It was almost like they felt like, okay, we've set this thing where we need to pick really good music, so it's like it's there and then faded out. You know what I mean? Or it's
Yeah,
there and cut out. It's not that Guardians 1 and they get away from it a little more in Guardians 2. It's not that Guardians feel where the music is so centrally tied to that sequence. It's just kind of it's there and then it's gone. It's not part of the story, it feels like.
and I think part of the issue there is that this franchise is known for music.
Mm-hmm.
It can definitely be difficult to try to make it feel organic. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess it just didn't feel organic to me. Like I said, songs were great. I like the songs. But yeah, it was definitely different. What you said, I like what you said about when you went in, you were comparing it to the first two Guardians movies, but when you came out, you kind of have had some different thoughts. And for me, I was the same way. I went in expecting one kind of movie,
Mm-hmm.
and expectations when it comes to film, I'd say now more than ever, we expect something from Marvel.
Oh
We
yeah,
expect
for sure.
a certain kind of movie, a popcorn flick with action and some comedy, maybe some dark moments, but really just an entertaining visual feast. And this movie, while it has those elements, it's a different kind of story. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that just my expectations, and I do this every time. I'm glad I saw it twice,
Mm-hmm.
because when I go into a movie the first time, I'm expecting something, and it never lives up to expectations, or it changes. It's not at all what I was expecting. But
Yeah.
when I see it a second time, I know what to expect, so I can appreciate it on a different level. And that's where I think this movie really kind of took a step in the right direction in my thoughts towards it. The second time I saw it, I saw how tight the script was, which you may be surprised that I say that. Just a lot of the things that were brought up were mentioned again. And I always like when that happens in a film. But yeah, I think one of the things we wanted to talk a little bit about is the pacing.
Yeah, it's very fast paced. Don't be late on this one because it gets right into the story. There is like very little exposition, which you know, a movie that had two movies before it, well, kind of, I would say two, and then from what I understand, like parts of two others. I mean, through Infinity War and Endgame, you know, our Guardians characters are in both of those movies. Definitely, I would say see Infinity War and Endgame before going this if you haven't already. I saw Infinity War and I didn't see Endgame, and we started in a place that I was unfamiliar with. Which, not to get on my high horse here, but it's my beef with Marvel a little bit because they've created such a giant universe that's so interconnected through all these movies. If you miss one or two, you're left out of things in some movies, and I definitely felt left out a little bit at the beginning of this because I didn't quite understand where they explained it well enough that you know you understand where the story is, but it leaves you with a few question marks. So definitely I would recommend seeing definitely Guardians 1 and 2, and then Infinity War and Endgame if you have not seen those before going into this. And like I said, do not be late because right out of the gate, we're going.
Yeah, I actually think that if you were to watch Guardians 1, 2, and 3 back to back to back, Guardians 3 works better. Because at least for me, I was thinking about what you said about basically there's no exposition. It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
And in my eyes, like I almost got the exposition from the ad campaign. And the fact that we watched the movies back to back the last 2 weeks. So I kind of, I don't know, it was a little bit more emotional for me. Or it felt like it wasn't as necessary. But as we texted back and forth, I think there's a significant amount of this movie that was cut out.
Yeah, I would imagine because it's a 2.5 hour runtime ballpark, right?
Yeah.
And it uses every minute of that. And so I can imagine in its inception, there was probably things shot towards the beginning that make it feel more of a traditional pace, but probably for time they cut some of those things to get to the things at the end. I will say the first half of this movie I was frustrated, and then the second half, especially the third act, so really like last half to last third of this movie I really enjoyed, and it pays off really, really well. I think I see what you mean when you say it's tight because things pay off.
Yes, and I think this is one of the only movies that in recent memory I can think of that I can see where there were edits. You know, like I said before, you could kind of see that there was some beginning of Act 1 that they just cut out for time.
Yeah.
But I like the characters here. I think they kind of sideline Groot a little bit in this,
Somewhat, yeah.
but he's used well. And overall, I mean, I really enjoy it. But let's go into a Rosebud and Thorn, and we'll have some final thoughts, and we will let you all go and see it if you haven't already. Jake, what are your Rosebud and Thorn?
Rosebud and Thorn. My rose in this movie is gonna be Rocket. I really think that they really explore his character a lot, and as upsetting as some of it can be, I think it's a wonderful character arc, and we've gotten bits of Rocket here and there through the first one. You know, I think you see him. We kind of just establish a baseline in the first one. We get a little more into him in the second one, and then this is really just like full on like Rocket's backstory. and some of his trauma and explaining why Rocket is the way he is. And it's a beautifully tragic character arc that really yanks at your heartstrings. And so I love what they did with that. And I think Bradley Cooper did a wonderful performance. I know when we walked out of the theater, we were like, if Rocket had been played like by an actual actor and wasn't a raccoon, this would be an Oscar-worthy performance, and I would agree.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It's
I
written, the writing for his character in this movie is insane.
I would
It's
agree.
so good.
Yeah. Bud, I already touched on it. I feel like the music, while the song choices were good, I just felt like it was not used in the same way that they used in the first two. And I think they used their song choices very well in the first, and then I know we kind of disagree on this point, but I would say in the second as well. And I feel like they weren't chosen as intentionally and used as intentionally in this one. So that's going to be my bud. And my thorn in this one, I'm going to say, is Gamora. I understand what they did with the character. I don't like it. And I think it really sidelined her. And I felt like it we took so many steps back with her. And yes, I know you make the argument that it's a different character, and I see the argument. I don't like it, and I don't think I think this movie, you could just completely have cut Gamora out of it, and 85 to 90% of it would have worked perfectly as is.
I agree. I agree. For me, my rose is definitely going to be Rocket in this movie. I think his performance is spectacular. I said this in the first Guardians review, but I think that, Peter Quill had to be the lead in the original Guardians, or else it wouldn't have grounded the story. I think Rocket could be a lead in another Guardians movie and it would be completely grounded because they've done so much work with the character. His performance is spectacular. I really liked it. James Gunn, I think, is at tip top shape here. This may be his best movie. I think he deserves a rose. My third rose goes to Chris Pratt as Peter Quill Star-Lord. I think he gives an excellent performance here. Very nuanced. They ask him to do a little bit more than in the other movies. He has more dimension here. So those three are my roses. My bud, I'm going to agree with you on the music. I would have liked to see it done a little differently here. This is going to be maybe a little weird to say. I wanted this to be longer. And not every movie has to be longer, but I felt like we could have supported the story, could have supported like a longer movie. I wanted to see a little bit more with these characters. It's very, very quick. They're trying to cover a lot. And I feel like 2.5 hours was a little short. And especially in a post Endgame world where Endgame was 3 hours long. I mean, this doesn't need to be 3 hours, but this is like the Guardians swan song, right? This is like their magnum opus. So I would have liked to see it definitely a little bit longer, maybe 10 minutes. So we could get more from, I felt like the bud I have is Adam Warlock. I want to see more from his character. I think Will Poulter is really funny in this. And I look forward to seeing more from him in the future. Don't really have any thorns. I really like this movie. Is this top 5 MCU? It may be. I'd have to really think about it. I really liked this movie. And of course, working at Flix, I've seen parts of it multiple times already because I'm running food in, I'm taking orders as the movie's going. So I've already seen different bits and pieces. I also will say, as we're doing our final thoughts, Drax is so good. I love Drax so much. You've mentioned to me that you have some issues with tone in this movie, and I agree with you on those. But any scene with Drax in it, Drax and Mantis are like the Abbott and Costello of like superhero movies. And I want you to talk about those tone issues you have quickly. But yeah, Drax and Mantis are the different tone because they're so funny. But if you could kind of go into that, I really
I agree with you, by the way. Drax and Mantis are hilarious. I just felt like this movie gave me a case of emotional whiplash. not necessarily in a good way. Driving home from the theater yesterday, I kept trying to compare it in my mind to something. And honestly, the like closest thing I can compare it to as far as the emotional roller coaster I went through was Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah,
Because
that movie's wild.
that movie is all over the place emotionally. This movie is all over the place emotionally, but I feel like this movie I would have liked to see a little more shall we say gentleness with our emotional beats, because we went from some very dark places and then immediately cutting to a joke, and like something just it didn't vibe right with me. I felt I felt uneasy about that, and I wasn't sure how to feel, and so I feel like that may be one of that's kind of one of my issues, and why it took me a while to come around to appreciating this movie. I think it took me a day to really think on it. Um, it's something that's been in both Guardians films, but we've not dealt with subject matter as dark in the first two as we do in this one, and so I think just for that reason that it really kind of stuck out to me. As far as my closing thoughts, I I would encourage everyone to go into this not ex- don't go into this expecting the same thing as Guardians 1 and Guardians 2, because you're not going to get that. Go into this with an open mind. I do want to give some warnings, not giving away any spoilers here, but this does deal significantly with some scenes of animal cruelty. So if that is something that is a trigger for you or really bothers you, I just want to warn you before going into that. That's what you're getting yourself into. But no, this is, I think it's a very different movie than I was expecting, but that's okay. I think it's wonderfully done. It's a well crafted story. I feel like you see some wonderful character arcs in this that I really enjoy. And fight scenes, we haven't even talked about that. The like climactic fight scenes all throughout like the third act are absolutely beautiful. I mean, like
The camera
artistry.
works insane. Yeah.
It's artistry. Um, and so seeing that on the big screen is really entertaining. Um, so yeah, I guess some of my closing thoughts: don't expect a popcorn flick, because that's not what this is. Even though I did enjoy a bag of
It's a
popcorn.
Kleenex flick.
Yes, I did have to pull out my handkerchief at one point and
You did, and I
dab some
I
tears.
knew, and we walked out. I knew the moment you started crying. I
Of
was like, he's
course,
gonna cry, and it was
it
so.
broke my heart.
So if Rocket was an elephant, you couldn't have made it
Oh
through
my
this
god,
movie.
I would have had a riot. I would have walked out. I would have walked out.
But yeah, so my closing thoughts. This is a great movie. Yep, leave expectations at the door for sure. And just go in with an open mind. Um, we don't do ratings here of, oh, this is an A or a B or this is a 90%, but we do thumbs up or thumbs down. I think I can speak for both of us in saying this is a thumbs up movie. This is one you want to go see in a theater. It's visually stunning. There are some cool scenes, and it's definitely a fitting end for this Guardians trilogy and James Gunn in the MCU. Obviously, he's now the head of DC Films, so he won't be doing any more Marvel movies. Um, but we want to know what you think. Have you seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 yet? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button, ringing all bells to get notifications on upcoming content. And if you want to hear more from us, follow Jake and myself on Instagram. Jake's on Twitter. And we also have a Cinefile Instagram. And do we have a Twitter?
We have a Twitter as well.
We have a Twitter as well. I'm not on the Twitters.
Elon hasn't ruined it enough for me to get rid of it yet.
Yes. So
He's
we
come
look
close,
forward
though.
to we look forward to hearing from you, and we will see you this next week with another movie review. But until then, for Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here soon. And cut.